The ocean is a conveyor and not an isolator. It has been man's highway from the days he built the first buoyant ships, long before he tamed the horse, invented wheels, and cut roads through the virgin jungles. When we imagine Ice Age people, maritime lifeways are often overshadowed by more iconic elements of that lost world. Bands of hunters pursuing mammoths, or a shaman winding between stalagmites, torch in hand. Many researchers have worked to establish the importance of the seas and rivers to Paleolithic hunter-gatherers. I'd like to introduce a few interesting archaeological sites and make some observations about the advantages of life along a shoreline. One of the simplest measures of prehistoric seafaring is, could ancient people cross open water? Well, by 110,000 years ago, there's evidence that islands on the southern Ionian coast of Turkey were inhabited, accessible only by voyaging several kilometers across the Aegean. That kind of voyage wouldn't have been a chance event. A handful of individuals clinging to a log for dear life, only to be washed ashore like castaways. That couldn't produce a long-term presence of the kind we see. Instead, we have to imagine purposeful accessing of these islands using some kind of watercraft. These islands were very likely first peopled by Neanderthals during the Middle Paleolithic, and later by anatomically modern humans during the Upper Paleolithic. We know Neanderthals exploited marine and freshwater resources. One line of evidence is osteological. Bony calluses in the inner ears of numerous Neanderthal individuals show evidence of swimmer's ear, a possible sign of foraging for food in cold, aquatic environments. Another line of evidence is fish bones found all over Europe at Middle Paleolithic cave sites, where the fine bones have a better chance of preserving. As early as 60,000 years ago, people had populated the Wallacean archipelago and crossed the Timor Sea to Australia. In an ambitious feat of experimental archaeology, researchers have tried to replicate this journey, to find out the bare minimum level of technology required to reach Australia. This experiment found that reaching Australia required a vessel with steering capability and some kind of simple sail, with a frame capable of withstanding the rigors of deep water voyaging. To construct such a vessel would have required complex forward planning, and people who understood hundreds of specific technologies and skills, all pooling them for a single task. However, whatever vessels they built failed to preserve in the archaeological record, and instead we're left with fragments of bone and stone. Paleolithic sophistication can be no more determined from the period's refuse than modern capability to fly to the moon is indicated by the contents of municipal garbage dumps. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, we know people were fishing close to shore before 50,000 years ago. But fish and shellfish represented in that assemblage are shallow water species and would not have required boats or complex technology for their capture. On the other hand, by 42,000 years ago, we know people in East Timor, at a site called Jerimalai Shelter, were capturing fish from the open ocean, and they've identified fish hooks as old as 23,000 years at the site. By this point, people already had an intimate relationship with the sea and relied on marine resources. Around 17,000 years ago, people occupied the site of Ohala II in Israel's Rift Valley. The site is now waterlogged, but archaeologists were able to excavate enough to identify 8 species of fish, belonging to multiple freshwater families. The archaeologists who excavated that site claim that Ohala II's inhabitants used their knowledge of the breeding behavior of different species of fish for year-round intensive exploitation. Archaeologists have observed the advantages of big game hunting during the expansion of Ice Age humans around the globe into sparsely populated or completely uninhabited continents. One interesting point is that traditional ecological knowledge is a critical resource, and when modern hunter-gatherers emigrate, they can often tap the traditional ecological knowledge of the local population. For example, among the Walbiri of Central Australia, different groups maintain myths that act as devices for the memorization of a territory, especially the location of water sources. But if one is on the front wave of colonization of new continents or regions, there may be no ecological knowledge to turn to. Animals tend to be available year-round and they're widely dispersed across a region, while edible plants tend to vary more with local geography. A lifeway suitable for this task is one that placed primary reliance on faunal rather than plant resources. It is easier to locate, procure, and process the faunal as opposed to floral resources of an unknown region. That's all well and good, but I think it's also true of coastal marine resources. If you can gather shellfish, set traps and lines, or cast a net along one coast, you can do it without much change along another coast, or along many rivers and lakeshores for that matter. There are two other advantages to maritime lifeways that I'd also like to share. First, water makes for easy travel. In the days before the horse, the wheel, or the road, moving things by water was far easier, and the coasts and rivers of the world were the arteries on which we traveled and traded. Second, oceans act as climate regulators. While continental climates are characterized by hot summers and freezing winters, coasts tend to be mild places that put less seasonal stress upon the people who choose to live there. Maritime peoples have long been associated with some of the most populous, complex societies hunter-gatherers are capable of producing. For example, the Tlingit of North America's Pacific Northwest lived in large settlements, had hierarchical societies, practiced slavery, and fought wars, all on a foundation of marine resources. Large coastal settlements dating to the European Mesolithic provide another example. Norge Sunnensund, located in southern Sweden, is dated to as early as 9,600 years old, and is among the first sites in Scandinavia that foragers occupied year-round. Some of the earliest large, sedentary foraging communities of East Africa also relied on aquatic resources from the White Nile, at the Al-Khedei Mesolithic sites of central Sudan. Sea levels have risen dramatically since the end of the Pleistocene, and whole subcontinents have been flooded or reduced to islands. There was Sunda, the combination of Southeast Asia and Indonesia, and Sahul, the combination of Australia and Papua New Guinea. There was Doggerland, occupying much of the English Channel and North Sea, and there was Beringia, between modern-day Alaska and Siberia. Along many of the world's coastlines beyond these subcontinents, enough movement has taken place to submerge what ancient maritime settlements there may have been. The extensive lowlands, wetlands, estuaries, and shores that vanished below the sea offered unrivaled ecological attractions with regard to the productivity, diversity, and stability of resources for prehistoric fishers, hunters, gatherers, and farmers. The complex richness of these landscapes very probably rendered them of fundamental significance for the biological evolution and cultural development of our species. Moreover, these now lost lands were central to the spread of humans across the world. Classical examples are the migrations of early humankind into Australia and the Americas, which involved the occupation of now submerged and as yet uninvestigated landmasses. One of the last frontiers of Paleolithic archaeology, then, must lie beneath the waves.